When I made the video on Virgil, which is so far my favorite video of the ones I made, I had not played Devil May Cry 4, which is something I regret because I could have used examples of forced bosses, like the reuse, the combos or the final boss. Well, too late to change it. However, I would like to say I've beaten DMC3 on Dante Must Die. I used the items and in a lot of missions, but not gonna lie, but I still did it. Okay? I did it. And the Virgil's fights were as awesome. Okay, enough of DMC3. If you ask me about DMC4, well, many enemies lack good telegraphing, some enemies are dreadful to fight, there are many annoying platform gimmicks, the pacing is pretty good with Nero but awful with Dante because you don't have enough time to master all of his abilities. Backtracking the entire game with Dante was stupid, you have to fight 4 bosses 3 times with 0 differences and like 1. Many characters and the story altogether feel incomplete and the final boss is underwhelming. With all of this you might say, whoa, this game sucks, right? Nope, it's actually really awesome. The combat absolutely defeats Devil May Cry 3. Dante's gameplay is stupidly deep and Nero is really good too. Maybe he doesn't have the variety of DMC3's Dante, but his moveset in the ground and especially in the air make him really fun. And mechanics like exceeding or his stun are also really good. And the Devil Bringer is the best mechanic in 4 because it allows Nero to show off without quick time events, reposition its enemies or brings you to them. It's balanced because stronger enemies will dodge it or block it until you get them in a good position or damage them enough, and it can even be used as a counter. This will be important later. Enemies will normally have more than one attack now, even if many of them could have better telegraphing. Sure, you have to fight 4 bosses 3 times, 2 bosses 2 times, but if you ignore the window, the Savior and Sanctus May being the final boss, all of the bosses in DMC4 are good, while DMC3 had more bad ones. I mean, if instead of repeating bosses they had created new ones, maybe this wouldn't be the case, but whatever. Fortuna may not be as interesting as Malay Island or the Temenni Crew, but it does its job. The story may not be as good and complete as DMC3, but it does have its highs.
It was originally my brother's. Return it to me, and I'll let you go, kid. Well, that's how you see me think you're blushing pretty pink when I kick your ass! Hey! What's your name?
Nero. You're Dante, right? Not a bad name.
Neither is yours. Time to wake up, kid! You're missing out on all the fun! Nero!
In fact, Sanctus may be a pretty mediocre villain, and I don't know if what I'm about to say was intended, but I do value that they tried to make Sanctus something of an opposite to Nero. Let me explain. Nero in the outside seems like an unlikable teenager while Sanctus looks like a pretty wholesome old man. Nero doesn't believe in anything religious while Sanctus is the leader of a religious organization. Nero is a demon who ends up becoming much more human than many people, while Sanctus is a human that ends up becoming something hardly different from a demon. Sanctus is actually not very different from a edgelord when not around people, while Nero is much more playful. Sanctus wants power for himself and considers love useless, while Nero wants power to protect those he loves. And in the final battle, Sanctus wields the Sparda, while Nero wields the Yamato, both swords of Sparda, and in the end Sanctus can't use the Sparda with its full power while Nero does it with the Yamato. All of this doesn't magically make Sanctus a good villain, but I think it's interesting and not very talked about. Oh, and the music is sick. So that was my mini review of DMC4. It could have been better than DMC3 if they had finished it. I mean, most of the flaws are because of rushed development. Even some positives like inertia are because of rushed development since they're not in DMC5, a complete game. So to better summarize it, one of the worst best games ever made. There are many things I could talk about this game, like the nature of repeating content, the boss fight, the combat mechanics, but the thing I want to talk about the most is these two bosses. Aside from the window, these are the only bosses who are not repeated, unless you count that part with the Savior in the Sanctus fight, and that you fight Agnus in the window. So Credo is ironically the only boss who's not repeated in any kind of way. These two caused the opposite reaction in the internet. Every time I go through Reddit or a place where people discuss DMC4, it's normally accepted that Credo is one of the best bosses in the game and in the series.
Credo is the real deal. Credo Angelo is the best fight in this game, and one of the best bosses in the series.
It's what is possibly my favorite boss fight in the series so far, Credo. This boss fight is so damn good.
Credo is one of the best boss fights of all time, up there with Virgil in Devil May Cry 3.
And the Savior is one of the worst.
This is the worst part of the game. The Savior boss fight is badly designed.
Lows so lows that they make me not want to touch some of these levels ever again.
But then there is also the Savior, which is absolutely terrible. You shoot its crystals until it dies. That's it. It's boring, and nothing fun or interesting can be done with it. You know what this reminds me of?
In this video I would like to look into why this is the case. I think I already took too much of your time on an introduction, so let's start the real video. Okay, one more thing, I will be focusing on Nero and Dante in this video. These bosses can vary in quality depending on the character. For example, Virgil's concentration drops every time you hit his shield, and Virgil doesn't have as much mobility as Nero while dodging. And many of Virgil's attacks can leave Credo helpless, and overall the fight was clearly not designed for Virgil. So I will stick to the character they were made for. The footage of this video is on Dante Must Die, if you're curious. First of all, there's a thing that divides good bosses from great ones in action games, and that's how the boss is connected to the game mechanics. Since the other video was about Virgil, let's use him. Devil May Cry 3 mechanics are about avoiding getting hit by enemies and most importantly stagger the enemies with multiple combos. In the Virgil fight, Virgil will block your attacks until he attacks you. After he's finished, you can stun him and do combos on him. He has many attacks that can be more easily dodged with Trickster or blocked with Royal Guard for massive damage. You can use Doppelganger for way more damage, you can use Quicksilver for, well, stop time for advantage, or you can use it in a stylish way in Dante Must Die to break his spiral sword like Donguri. Any melee weapon or gun can be used effectively against him, even if some are more effective than others. Devil Trigger is encouraged in normal difficulties by Virgil's own Devil Trigger, and taunting to fill the Devil Trigger is more than possible thanks to the Virgil Stagger. Virgil doesn't disencourage any playstyle unlike Arkham, well maybe Gunslinger but whatever, who literally takes away your styles, and Devil Trigger. Or Beowulf and Cerberus, who only stagger for a combo in a very specific circumstance, which is not really intuitive. Those two are really good bosses, but that's what I refer to the difference between good and great. In this department, Credo is one of the best in the series. DMC4 has way more mobility in the air, so unlike Virgil, Credo can be thrown in the air for combos. Unlike Virgil, who was like a similar but different version of Dante, since Dante already exists in this game for that, Credo's more like a buffed version of the Angelo Knights of the game, and just like them, if you hit his shield enough times you will stagger him. His shield also changes color, so these two factors make it more clear than Cerberus or Beowulf, and it plays similarly to an enemy in the game. Just like the Angelos and other bosses, you can buster him here for a cool move that does a lot of damage. And the version with Devil Trigger is also really cool. However, one difference Credo has with the other bosses, except with Dante, is that you can buster him throughout the fight. It will simply break his shield faster, but it is better than nothing. However, where the booster truly shines is with this attack. When you booster the Angelo Knights, Nero will grab their spears in a way that's no suspicious at all. So when you see Credo summon a spear, your brain might make the connection and boom, spear grabbed. Even if you don't want to grab it, you can block it for health or just dodge it. The timing can be dog though. If he catches you in a combo, you can interrupt him with your devil trigger, and it can even break his Virgil arrows. And finally, thanks to the staggers, you can do taunts and not get punished for it. The only thing I would add is to make his shield go faster with exterior attacks, because I didn't notice any difference between normal and exterior attacks when he blocks. I think it will be rewarding for making the timings right. As you see, Credo is very connected to the game mechanics and Nero's moveset, so how is the savior in this? Well, Dante has a stupid amount of variety, and this is the only exclusive boss for Dante, but most of his moves is really wasted. The first phase of the savior has you going around trying to break the crystals of his body. There's nothing you can do other than use your weapons to break them. There's no creativity possible. You just press the buttons to win while dodging attacks. In the second phase, you have to break the crystal in his chest. You have 2 chances to make combos, but why would you? He's so static here, it's impossible not to do just a real impact or an overdrive. The only thing your attacks do in this fight is deal damage, compared to Credo, who can be stunned, thrown away, up or down, or even Virgil, who will stagger more or less depending on the attack, and if you try a move too slow, he will block it or dodge it. Cerberus and Beowulf, who I've been using as examples, could be damaged outside of these moments. The stun was just a reward and they could get up and damage you. Your damage to the savior with the guns is minimal, and hitting his hands is only worth to stun him. In summary, he just stops being a boss for a few seconds so you can deal actual damage to him, which makes the rest of the fight kinda boring because you can't deal real damage outside of these moments. At least in your defensive moves you have more options. You can block some of his attacks, jumping and trickster are as useful as always, and royal guard is the same. In fact, this is the only moment where Dreadnought is actually useful in a stylish way.
I'm fucking invincible! What the Christ? Don't fuck with me, Jack!
And finally, they did foresee the issue with taunts in this fight. Normally your taunt will do nothing if you're too far away, so in this fight specifically, you are allowed to taunt and still get the benefits of the taunt no matter the distance, since you'll never be close to the savior. The worst offender, however, is with Yamato.
Even Yamato is powerless in opposition to the savior!
Normally in a video game, when you get a weapon or ability and immediately encounter a boss, you normally would expect such thing to be useful against the boss. For example, spoilers for 1 and 5. In DMC 1, when you finally unlock the Devil Trigger for the Sparta Sword, its abilities are very useful with Mundus. In DMC 5, when Dante unlocks the Sin Devil Trigger right before Urizen, the upgrade makes breaking his shield very easy. And in DMC 5 you recover the Devil Bringer right before a boss that has many boosted animations. End of spoilers. But in the Savior fight, right after you obtain Yamato, it is completely useless. It doesn't do anything that the other weapons don't do. I think this is a huge wasted opportunity. Now, don't get me wrong, how the boss adapts to the game mechanics doesn't immediately determine if a boss is good, but it certainly helps. However, there is something more important than that. Let's talk about their moveset. Credo can block you with his shield. The more you hit it, the closer he will be to staggering, and even then you will normally hit it by accident. After blocking you, or just when he's near you, he will attack. His attacks are very well telegraphed, and he combines them in many different ways. Their speed animations are different, so you have to time it. Some come so fast it's almost impossible to roll away normally. But thanks to Nero's extra dodge that he does when you time the roll makes it much easier, pretty much forcing you to learn his moves, to time it correctly. And his drive, I call it drive because it's similar to the move that Dante does and it doesn't have a name. His drive attack also stops you from being in the air to dodge. His most interesting attack is when he teleports away and summons a spear. You can dodge it, hit it for health, or grab it, or both at once. This will give a huge push to the style meter, and for good reason because it's pretty difficult. Even if he hits you, he will immediately stop to give you a break. Which doesn't make a lot of sense because if he sees it works he should try to do it more, but whatever. All of this happens until phase 2, which triggers depending on the difficulty. On Devil Hunter it triggers when he's close to death, and in Dante Must Die when you pass half his health. Here Credo goes absolutely berserk. He gains a stinger attack which comes a bit too soon, but I think it's well communicated. He attacks more frequently and also gains Virgil's summon swords. Don't worry, they are pretty easy to break, unlike the ones in 3, which seem to be made of adamantium or something. Here even activating Devil Trigger breaks them, but they do a lot of damage. Oh, and breaking them also refills Devil Trigger, so you can be in Devil Trigger for longer, so both Credo and Nero can be fighting at full strength in this part. As far as I've seen, they have 4 different combinations, and stacked with Credo's higher aggressiveness makes the fight really intense. This is why most people, including myself, find Credo so much fun. It's relentless action with hard but fair design, a constant back and forth, which is a great part of what makes the fights with Virgil so good in the previous game, and this is exactly what the Savior fails to deliver. The Savior has already a disadvantage from the very start. Because the Savior is so big, you can't fight this thing in the ground, which is possible even with pretty big bosses, but with the Savior the camera will not show his entire body, which will look pretty dumb. You would only be able to see his feet. Because of this, they had to design the fight in a way you could see the Savior, so the solution was to make a boss where you had to traverse his body. This works well in games like Shadow of the Colossus, but that game was literally designed for these kind of bosses. You could climb the monsters and hurt their weak points. Devil May Cry has no mechanics for a boss of this size, so you have to jump across the arena. I mean, what the hell. Let's say the Savior generates gravity around itself, but why do all these platforms have conveniently placed springboards for Dante to jump? The DMC series isn't the most immersive and serious series, but I don't see this kind of stupidity with Credo, well, any of the bosses in the game. Also, what's the deal with some platforms jumping instantly and some require you to jump? This has gotten me hit more than once. To make it less dumb, Dante should just naturally jump like in DMC1. This approach also brings 2 problems. Firstly, because the Savior is stuck in one place, his attacks need to hit either the exact same place where you are or cover all of the arena, so positioning doesn't matter at all. Secondly, because he's far from you, the only way to hit him is when he attacks you or leaves himself open. In the first phase you can go to his hands to break his crystals, but that doesn't happen in the second phase. In both parts there's something very useful the game doesn't communicate in any way. The more you hit the Savior, the closer he'll be to stagger. In the first phase, it seems like the only way to hit some of his parts, so anyone who decides it's not worth hitting them is pretty much screwed unless you find one of the cannons. These things amuse me. These cannons are nowhere to be seen in the rest of the game, and suddenly they appear out of nowhere for players who are stuck. Dante running throughout the arena, and suddenly, he finds a freaking cannon to blast the Savior with. Anyway, in the second phase, hitting his hands also staggers him for you to destroy the chest. If you don't figure out hitting his hands is actually useful, well, the only way you can damage him is role-playing as DMC2. In the second phase there's another way to do damage. I've seen people call this inconsistent, but it actually isn't. First, he must break one of the platforms, then you have to come back to the main arena and he will always do it. After this you have to reset the arena by making him break the platform you're in, and repeat. This however brings some problems. He has 3 attacks that break platforms. One is the beam, so it is discarded, unless you have Royal Guard. In that case, well, the second one reminds me of Dante's Gilgamesh combo, but it's really difficult if not impossible to avoid damage and fall off the platform, unless you use Royal Guard, so there's that. So there's only one attack where it is safe to fall, which is this one, but I have no idea how to trigger it. By the way, everything I've said about the Savior is stuff I noticed while fighting him. So there may be some information missing or inaccurate, but I don't think so. However, all this stuff I learned it by fighting the Savior with Dante, Virgil, Trish, Dante again. A player that fights this for the very first time won't have any idea on how to damage him, which adds on why many people find him dreadful to fight. Also, the platforms will not regenerate until you fall, which created this very fun situation. Lol. By the way, what's the deal with the enemies in the first place? I normally complain about enemies in boss fights, but here it's just so easy to go past them. They could not be there and you wouldn't blink an eye. I guess they're there for stylish points, or just so you can test the Yamato with something that moves, I don't know. There's also this part where I honestly think it is impossible for anyone to fall into, but if you do, you'll be dragged into an incredibly unfair fight. It's so random. The attacks of the Savior are also incredibly simplistic. He hits you, he can throw balls at you that you can break, he can throw bigger balls that you can't break, but hey, wanna know something else that can't be broken? And his giant laser that I don't know if I'm exaggerating when I say that you could drink a coffee while he cast it. Well, it's easy for me to just criticize, but I don't think it was impossible to make a good fight out of a giant statue. It just needed a different direction. You can do many things, but let me tell you what I think will be a better concept for a fight. By the way, since I'll be talking about an imaginary fight, of course I can't show it to you. And I'm not going to gather footage around many games to show an approximation. Use your brain and imagination. You know, the thing God, the universe, your parents or whatever you believe in gave it to you for a reason. The setting should occur in some very tall buildings. You will have to modify Fortuna a bit, but is that really such a problem? This will solve the problem with the Savior breaking stuff. In fact, maybe a few towers could break as the battle progresses. The Savior could use his hands both for magic attacks and physical ones. His hands should leave themselves open when they attack. You could put the crystal in his hands or simply make the hands change color as you hit them. Hitting one of the hands enough should leave his head exposed for you to make combos. However, I think the head should have physics like a normal enemy, so you can do air combos, you know, stuff like that. I know it will look a bit weird, but come on, it's a Devil May Cry game. Keeping enemies in the air is already ridiculous, and Dante probably has enough strength to do that. These are the basics I will use for a fight against the Savior. There are many more things to consider, like his health bar, the attacks or the duration of the fight, but I'm not going to program it, so I'm not going to dive that deep. So yeah, that's why Credo is great and Savior isn't. But there are a few things I wanna add in this video. First, the story. In the video on Virgil I touched briefly on how well Virgil is paced with the story. Regretfully, I can't say the same with Credo. First, supposedly Nero is Credo's adoptive brother, and it was Credo the one who trained Nero. Nothing in the game mentions this in any way. Oh, and it also bothers me. If they had this relationship, they probably had some attachment to each other. Okay, why does Credo accept so easily to capture Nero? Come on, he doesn't even say something like, Nero is going after Dante, we should let him finish his job. And then Gloria says she'll do it. Imagine if Credo trusted Nero, but then Agnus reveals that Nero is a demon, and Credo just tries to deny it, until where he accepts the truth and he is conflicted. For one side, he wanted to end all demons, but for the other, Nero is like a younger brother to him. He could even tell Nero that he feels betrayed since he trusted him and he turned out to be a demon. That would have been so much better, and you only need to change bits of the dialogue. But Nero isn't much better either.
Back down. I don't want to hurt you. I won't do that to Kitty.
Like, this means the only reason he doesn't want to hurt one of the two members of his family and his mentor is because of Kyrie? Really? Oh, but this is nothing next to what happens after the fight. First, Nero for some reason approaches in a very weird and intimidating way, and then Kyrie is there. And then Nero takes ages to talk, and he never even considers telling her that Credo attacked first. Then Agnus appears and acts like the good guy.
It was our intentions to protect you from the truth. Nero, is a demon.
But then he just kidnaps her. Why did he try to act benevolent at first but then evil again?
No intentions of harming her. Yet.
It is just for his own amusement? If he wanted to harm Nero emotionally, then Kyrie believed Nero and tried to bargain with Agnus, and then Agnus decides to kidnap her, then it wouldn't feel so random. While the fight with Credo is great, the plot of it is far from the best it could be. Meanwhile, the plot with the Savior works pretty well. Throughout the game, it is implied that the Order is planning something big, and when you find out what it is, well, it is pretty big. In the fight with Sanctus, you get a glimpse of the power of the Savior. During the Dante campaign, the whole plot is to stop the Savior and save Nero. The whole thing is pretty well written, and it can even be funny if you pay attention.
You could never touch the power of the Savior.
So, you ready to eat your words?
Although I would have liked it if Sanctus had some voice lines during the fight. I always love when you fight a character that for the life of him doesn't shut up, like, I don't know, Credo? I mean, imagine if Sanctus was just talking like Armstrong when he is in the Metal Gear Excelsus, which is pretty similar, to be honest. Something else? Oh, the designs are both pretty good. Credo actually looks like an angel, unlike the others, which shows he doesn't have evil intentions. And his shield, his sword, it's pretty memorable. The Savior is memorable as well. His size makes it pretty imposing, and the whole thing is pretty neat. Oh, the music is pretty great. Credo has the electronic guitar. I don't know a lot about music, sorry. Overall, the track really reminds me of the mood the music with the Angelo Knights have. And those Angelo Knights have a mood pretty similar to the one of Nero Angelo. Pretty damn catchy. Then the Savior is also fantastic, but in a very different way. I think these comments describe it better than I could. Besides, the chorus many times sings itself very satisfyingly to what's happening on screen, more than other bosses. So I think that's everything about both bosses, so it is time to write a conclusion. So, to sum it up, Credo is a fantastic boss that uses excellently the game mechanics and provides a very engaging challenge. It's no surprise it is a fan favorite. The Savior on the other hand is a disaster, a complete disappointment made all the worse being Dante's conclusion. However, I do think some people really exaggerate it, like I've heard some saying it is top 5 worst, or that it is at the level of Arkham or most DMC2 bosses. I think that's a bit too much, and he is by no means the worst boss in this game. I'm looking at you. So that's all I have to say about DMC4. Check some of my other videos. If you're interested in DMC, check my video on Virgil. Well, see you next time.
Now, foolish. All that is needed is absolute power.
And the rest is silence.